So welcome everybody. This is I suppose the fourth week of our class, and I just want to make a few preliminary remarks about not so much about the details of Rachel's essay. What we're reading here is an essay called "Darwin, Species, and Morality" by philosopher James Rachels, but rather just an explanation of why I chose this essay and why I think it's important to take into account Darwin and the implications of Darwinism or Darwin's evolutionary theory in a class about human nature. Darwin's evolutionary theory, as Rachels describes in the opening, to the introductory part of his essay, has had vast influence on how we think of ourselves. And one of the things that he remarks, I think is very true, is that philosophers for a long time completely ignored those implications, which was a mistake. It's kind of hard to believe, frankly. We just finished reading Sartre's Existentialism as a Humanism, that Sartre doesn't take Darwin into account. That is, that Sartre goes so far in saying that we are utterly free, that there is no such thing as human nature because our existence precedes our essence. I think Darwin would have thought, and I'm not saying that he'd be right about it, but I think Darwin would have thought that Sartre was absolutely insane. That is, that to say that we have no nature, to say that we don't come into the world with certain dispositions, with a certain structure, to Darwin's mind, I think that would be clearly a blunder. That is, if we view ourselves fundamentally as biological creatures, of course we have a nature. I mean, what exactly that means maybe needs to be worked out. But for Darwin, the notion that our existence precedes our essence is a willful ignorance of everything that we've come to know about the origins of human beings. Rachel's, in his introductory pages, does, I think, a very good job of discussing this general issue and what he thinks we need to come to terms with. And I would say that we all do need to come to terms with it, because on the one hand, whatever our religious beliefs may be, whatever our beliefs about what it means to be a human being may be, we simply have to acknowledge the fact that evolutionary theory is a well-established scientific research program, that modern biology assumes that the basics of Darwinism, at least in terms of the fact of evolution, are well established. Again, we may or may not see this as a threat to other beliefs, but I think that we have to acknowledge that pretty well established theory. What is that theory? The theory is that species change over time. That species change over time, that if you look across the globe at the plants and animals and other creatures that inhabit our planet, that they have not always been here. And in fact, that they have evolved from earlier forms of life. And this in itself may be seen as a challenge, because that would mean that the whole notion of species is a fluid thing. That species change over time. Species evolve into other species. Species go extinct, etc. But the big sort of step here is to say, well, this includes human beings. That is, that just as we can see that certain varieties or species of mammals, varieties of dog, or Darwin in the Origin of Species loves to discuss pigeons, different varieties of pigeons, that they come from a common ancestor, that human beings also have in the past, and really the deep history, the ancient history, you might say, of the species, have evolved from other forms. That is, that humanity is not something that was created all at once in the form in which we find ourselves now, but that humanity is an outcome of a very long evolutionary process. what that process is just the basics of Darwinism. And if you need to get up to speed on the basics of Darwinism, just read the Wikipedia article. I mean, it's a pretty simple theory. The notion is that species do change over time by means of natural selection, and that this is a very slow process, very gradual process, but that it can pretty much be validated by looking at the fossil record, looking at the relatedness of different species. For instance, it's clear that we share a tremendous amount of genetic material with our closest cousins in nature, the apes, especially chimpanzees, etc. So the reason I'm giving you this is because I do think that, again, I don't think that Darwinism rules out anybody's other beliefs, but it is a huge challenge to conceive of ourselves within the Darwinian picture, and it is part of being a modern person, really, I think. I mean, just as I think that for any person not to, at least, whether you're a believing person in terms of religion or whether you're an atheist or an agnostic, I think that we all have to take into consideration the question of God or the gods or whatever your beliefs are. Not that we have to believe or not believe, whatever. But I think it would be a huge mistake not to, at least once in your life, really think through the implications of Darwin in terms of your understanding of yourself and other human beings. And that is why I have included this essay. And again, it's not meant to be a doctrine in any way, but it is a huge challenge, I think, for us modern people to think about the implications of Darwinism for who we are.